Hey, this is Sherry Shogan reading March Book 1, pages 48 through 62. And where we last left off in the book was page 47. We saw that John Lewis's attitudes and feelings towards home changed after his trip north. He was so excited and happy to be home and see his family. And that was on the screen with the white background, and then there's a mood change. And it's not necessarily that black background means bad and white background means good. It's just that when there's a mood change, the background changes, so pay attention. And here we see that school should have been fun riding the bus. He was sad how different their lives were from the lives of the white children. And this next section is going to be about school and what that is like for him. Page 48. The county didn't bother paving roads into colored communities unless it was necessary for white traffic to pass through. Think to yourself, the law of the land was separate but equal. Does that sound equal to you? Our bus itself was an old hand-me-down, just like our school books. I realized how old it was when we finally climbed onto the paved highway, the main road running east from Troy and past the white children's buses. We passed their schoolhouses as well, with nice playground equipment outside, nothing like our cluster of small cinder block buildings with a dirt field out back for recess. So, they're nothing alike. Which one appears better to John Lewis? His or that of the white students? We drove past prison work gangs almost every day. The prisoners were always black, as were the folks working in the fields beyond them. You couldn't help but notice. And here he's referencing something where, sure, slavery has technically ended, but does this look very different from slavery? Despite everything that confronted me on the way to school, I was in heaven once I stepped inside it, and we can see from his body language that he's excited to get into the school, or at least off the school bus. I loved going to the library. It was the first time I ever saw black newspapers and magazines, like Jet, Ebony, the Baltimore, Afro-American, or the Chicago Defender. And I'll never forget my librarian, Corrine Harvey. And she looks really kind. She's looking at the kids directly in their eyes. My dear children, read. Read everything. Oops. Go back. But sometimes going to school was a luxury my family couldn't afford. When planting and harvesting seasons arrived, the reality of those fields displaced any dreams about the future. And so here he's got an older member of his family, an adult, pushing a plow and pointing for what John Lewis is supposed to be doing. I'd plead with them to let me go. You see his hands raised in the pleading. I'd explain how far behind I'd fall if I missed those days of classwork. We need you here, Bob, is the reply from looks like his father. Here he is at night, awake, windows open, staring up at the ceiling, thinking. And so I'd hide. I would get up and eat breakfast like normal. As the others made their way to the fields and the day's work, I would slip away. Bob, where are you? So recall that their farm that they own is 110 acres. So in order to get to the distant parts of the fields, they need to start walking away from the farm or getting a ride on a tractor away from their house, that is, early. So he'd be hiding there, and you'd see the vehicle driving off to where they're working in the fields that day. And here he's still hiding in the dark. Then, and here we see the school bus raising up a cloud of dust as it comes in his direction. When I could hear the approaching bus, I'd dash out, climb on, and be off. When I got home, my father would be furious. I was certain he'd tan my hide. What does it mean, tan my hide? That's a saying. It doesn't literally mean turn him into leather, but it does mean something about what he will feel afterward. Never do it again. We see a picture of his angry father. But he never did whip me. Not over that. I did it again, and of course he would scold me again. But deep inside, I think he knew there was no stopping me. This was a life decision I had made, and it was near impossible to turn me away from it. One May morning in 1954, near the end of my freshman year of high school, I read a headline that just turned my world upside down. And before we move on to this section, just note, 1, tanning your children's hide or whipping them was very normal back then. It is not normal now. His father was not an abusive father. And 2, note that John Lewis is a disobedient child, but for the sake of his education. The U.S. Supreme Court had handed down its decision in the school desegregation case of Brown versus the Board of Education of Topeka. And you see here John Lewis looking surprised, startled. Brown v. Board of Education is a familiar term in American speech, and it's the doctrine of separate but equal, upon which the entire institution of segregation was based, had been ruled unconstitutional. So, separate but equal, no longer legal. That's what Brown v. Board of Education decided. So here we see Montgomery Advertiser, big headline, segregation in schools outlawed, meaning black and white children must be allowed to go to school together. I was so excited. Surely everything was going to change. I thought that come fall, I'd be riding a state-of-the-art bus to a state-of-the-art school, an integrated school. Notice everything was going to change. Background, black background, white background, the change. Not everybody was so excited. Don't get into trouble. Don't you get in the way. But my parents' attitude didn't bother me nearly as much as those among the ministers at the church, who never mentioned these injustices in their sermons. It did not escape my notice that our minister always departed church in a very nice automobile. So the ministers at their church had money, had nice stuff, and never talked about the injustices in the world. Why do you think that would be? Then, one Sunday morning in early 1955, I was listening to WRMA out of Montgomery when I heard a sermon by someone unknown to me. And here they're sitting in front of the radio as though it's a TV, just listening. And we can't quite see what it's saying. Not yet. A young preacher from Atlanta. I didn't catch his name until the very end. Crackle. Whirr. And so, thank you. And again, you just heard Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Coming up next, we've got a real treat for you this Sunday. So he was listening to MLK Jr. for the first time, speaking on the radio. Dr. King's message hit me like a bolt of lightning. He applied the principles of the church to what was happening now, today. It was called the social gospel. And I felt like he was preaching directly to me. So John Lewis had an interest in preaching in the church and the gospel. He also had an interest in social justice. And the two were never together before, but with Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., Dr. King put those two together into one. I went to the school library on Monday to find out everything I could about this man. At the time, I could only find one newspaper article, but 1955 was a watershed year. What would watershed mean? What do you think? So at first, he could only find one newspaper article, and then there's the word but. So by the end, could he find many? Is that what watershed means? Context clues. In May, a second Supreme Court ruling in Brown v. Board prompted segregationist elected officials like Senator James Eastland of Mississippi and Strom Thurmond of South Carolina to swear to the death their continued defiance of the court. And here's one of them yelling into the microphone, even though it was illegal to segregate, these senators, these officials of the government, were saying, no, we're going to keep segregation. Lines had been drawn. Blood was beginning to spill. Here we see a picture. This is someone dressed in all black and looking into some kind of basket or something, and this basket looks big enough to hold a person. What do you think this is? Blood was beginning to spill. That August, an incident occurred which no one could ignore. Notice the black at the top of this page spilling down into white at the bottom. In Money, Mississippi, the body of 14-year-old Emmett Till, who was down from Chicago visiting relatives, was pulled from the bottom of the Tallahatchie River. So Money, Mississippi is the name of the town, and Emmett Till is the name of a boy who died. The day before, as he left the Money Country store with some friends, Emmett said, "Bye, baby," to the white woman behind the counter. The next day, he was dead. And if you look at the picture, it shows a really mangled body and face, and this is something that is well known in history. His what happened to him and how gory the body was at the end became famous in history. A black farmer named Moses Wright witnessed the two white men dragging Emmett Till from his relative's home and had the courage to testify against them in open court. The all-white jury found those two white defendants not guilty. So someone actually saw these two white dudes murdering Emmett Till, but the jury said not guilty. A few months later, they even confessed to the murder in Look magazine, but there was nothing to be done. They had already been tried. So, you can only be tried once for a crime in this country. So once they were acquitted, they were free, they were considered not guilty, they were like, yeah, we totally did that. We'll happily go into the newspapers and magazines and tell our story. We totally killed that guy. And they got away free. Then, on December 1, 1955, Rosa Parks refused to move to the back of the bus. "If you don't move, I'll be forced to call the police, and they will arrest you." Please note, Rosa Parks wasn't just feeling lazy that day. This was a planned thing. She was a member of the protest community, and they supported her doing this. This was planned in advance. And she says, calmly, "You may do just that." My family didn't know Rosa Parks, but they knew plenty of women like her. More than a few wives and mothers from Pike County did domestic work in Montgomery. She was arrested. Montgomery was just 50 miles down the road from us. Our minister lived there. Most of my teachers were from there. So when Dr. King, as president of the Montgomery Improvement Association, led a boycott of those buses, we felt like we were part of it too.